Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm just going to wait like 30 seconds to a minute while everyone joins. We already have over 350 people here for this session. This is really exciting. So we're just going to give it like 30 seconds to a minute before I start with some housekeeping. All right, thank you for joining. If you're just joining us, we are just giving it a minute for people to join. I'm Callie Freitag. I'm faculty here at the Sandra Rosenbaum School of Social Work at UW-Madison. And this is the breakout presentation, Building Resilience in the Face of Authoritarianism, Tools for Holding Ourselves and Our Communities Through Grief, Fear, and Fatigue. This is such a critical time for us as social workers, as members of our communities, of this world. And so thank you so much for joining us in this important discussion. There are over 3,000 people registered for this year's conference. And right now, wow, there's over 500 people on this webinar. This is very exciting. So one thing we'll do here in this conference, in the breakout sessions, is share a visual description. And this is an accessibility practice. So for me, again, I'm Callie Freitag, faculty at the School of Social Work here at UW-Madison. I am a 30-something white woman with like chin, almost shoulder length, blonde hair. And you can, my Zoom background is blurred. So that's my visual description. Next, as we get started, I'm going to again share our university's land acknowledgement. And this is practice. It can be seen as symbolic, but also it's like a reminder to ground ourselves in our land, in our space, and in our history. So the University of Wisconsin-Madison and the Sandra Rosenbaum School of Social Work occupy ancestral Ho-Chunk land, a place their nation has called Dejope since time immemorial. In an 1832 treaty, the Ho-Chunk were forced to cede this territory. Decades of ethnic cleansing followed when both the federal and state government repeatedly, but unsuccessfully, sought to forcibly remove the Ho-Chunk from Wisconsin. This history of colonization informs our shared future of collaboration and innovation. Today, UW-Madison respects the inherent sovereignty of the Ho-Chunk Nation, along with the 11 other First Nations of Wisconsin. So now I'm moving to a few quick Zoom reminders. This presentation is being recorded and will be available on our conference website at a later date. To access this presentation, you are required to provide your name and email. So this allows us to log our attendees and email you information on CEUs, which I know many of you are interested in. So those will be distributed via email at a later date. Your cameras and microphones will remain muted. The chat is disabled for this presentation because there's, wow, over 600 people logged in here today. And because of this large volume of attendees, we are doing a Q&A feature instead of a chat. So as you have questions, you're welcome to type in your questions into the Q&A feature. And small ones that we can answer as we go along, we will. But our presenters, Sophia and Rachel, are going to save time for questions at the end of this presentation. So if your questions are just sitting there, know that we intend to get to them. But Sophia and Rachel will also provide their contact information in case of questions that don't get answered. So now, okay, that is all the setting up we're going to do. And I am going to now introduce you to our presenters, Sophia Zisook and Rachel Niesen. So Sophia and Rachel, you're welcome to hop on screen if you want. So Sophia Zisook is a macro social worker, facilitator, and strategic leader working at the intersection of economic and gender justice, organizational resilience, and community care. She currently serves as Senior Director of Partnerships at, I'm not going to know how to pronounce this. Is it Action Opportunity Fund?
Action Opportunity Fund. AOF is maybe easier.
Thank you so much. Action Opportunity Fund, or AOF, where she leads national collaborations that expand access to capital for underestimated entrepreneurs. Sophia is also the founder of Negotiate with Sophia, a consultancy advancing negotiation for individuals and helping professions, and advancing liberatory grant-making and justice-oriented capacity building for organizations. With experience spanning community organizing, philanthropy, and economic development, she supports individuals and organizations in navigating complexity by integrating collective care frameworks. And Rachel Niesen is a white, queer psychotherapist, clinical social worker, and political organizer. Rachel works at Wild Roots Healing Collective and is a member of a local collective of politicized healers. So welcome. Thank you for being here. I'm thrilled you're here, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Callie. Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel. As Callie said, I'm a psychotherapist. I have a specialty in trauma, complex trauma, and substance abuse. I work with folks across a spectrum of socioeconomic backgrounds, seeing commercial insurance, Medicaid, CCS, and CCS clients in the area. I've been involved in various organizing projects since I first came to Madison for UW's social work program back in 2017, and was involved in the radical social work group here in Madison throughout my time in that program. For accessibility, I'll offer a brief visual description of myself. I'm a 32-year-old white woman with brown curly hair. I wear gold and black framed glasses, and today I'm wearing a white tank top and a blue velvet shirt on top.
Everyone, I'm Sophia by now. For accessibility, I'll also offer a brief visual description of myself. I'm a 32-year-old white woman with shoulder-length, kinky, curly brown hair. I wear brown tortoise-frame glasses. Today, I'm wearing a white collared shirt, a gold necklace, and white geode earrings. I tend to smile and talk a lot with my hands, so you can picture me doing that throughout this presentation. Before we begin, I want to name the weight of this moment. I think the audience who's come is a testament to what we're all feeling locally, nationally, and globally. Many of us are coming to this virtual room carrying exhaustion, fear, grief, anger, numbness, confusion. We are holding heartbreak, burnout, and in some cases, holding hope that feels fragile. I also want to normalize how hard it is to show up as helpers, social workers, therapists, organizers, caregivers, and all the different roles we play while being impacted by the very same systems harming clients and communities. Rachel and I are also showing up as white facilitators in this space, and we want to name that whiteness brings us certain layers of safety, buffer, and access that are not equitably distributed. We won't be able to unpack every dimension of race, class, and power today. Instead, we're focusing on frameworks and tools that help build clarity about your own needs, capacity, and agency in this moment. This is not about telling you what you should do. It's about strengthening your confidence in how you decide what is sustainable, ethical, and possible.
A few more things about this presentation today and our intentions. We're not here today to offer platitudes or toxic positivity. We're also not here to provide a list of 10 steps to fix fascism or how to be okay while the world is not. It's important to build resilience, not hide from this moment and this work, and not give in to fear. As James Baldwin said, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. We're more resourced and connected when we are paying attention to both our external and internal worlds. This connectedness supports us in choosing how to respond to situations most wisely. We will be offering ideas and practices to help with staying connected to ourselves, our people, and to possibility, even under pressure. Many of the ideas, strategies, and frameworks we offer you during this talk today can be directly applied to your work with clients. Much like other mental health and healing practices, we can embrace it for ourselves and see what lands, and then are better equipped to walk our clients and community through the same work. Some of this presentation, most of the first half, will be introspective and encourage you to tune into yourself. Some of this presentation, most of the second half, will be practical and tactical. A few housekeeping notes. There won't be a formal break, so please take care of yourself if you need to step out. You'll receive the slides and a resource guide, which includes all of the tools, frameworks, and authors we reference in the presentation afterwards. We'll also attempt to leave time for Q&A at the end, as we said. And if we run out of time, we will share ways for you to be able to reach out to us directly. All right. So just to ground us before we jump in, I'm going to share a few words about the moment we're in to contextualize our presentation. Between the $75 billion given to ICE, the murders of Keith Porter, Renee Good, Alex Preddy, the 32 people killed in ICE detention in 2025, the impunity given to the murderous ICE officers, the surveillance power that has been created by big tech and given to ICE and other law enforcement agencies, the denial of gender-affirming care to trans youth, Medicaid funding cuts, the villainization and scapegoating of anyone who doesn't fit the white cis patriarchal ideal. We can see that we are facing down a rapid increase in authoritarian policies and practices. The empire that is the United States is in decline globally, and the Trump administration is grasping at new and old straws from the worst periods of history in an attempt to maintain global economic power and domination. American brutality and violence domestically and abroad is not new. Regarding our profession, it is important to remember that only a few decades ago, social workers were doing what ICE does to our Native siblings, separating First Nations children from their parents, putting them in boarding schools, saying it was in the name of killing the Indian in him to save the man. Still today, we can look and see the disproportionate representation of Black and brown kids in foster care, and no social workers were involved in that process. Sociologist Dorothy Roberts talks about this in her book, Torn Apart, how the child welfare system destroys Black families and how abolition can build a safer world. Discussion of the social work profession's role as agents of an oppressive state is not meant to deny the other truth that there are many loving and courageous hearts in our field. The work we do is also responsible for connecting people to resources, advocating for just policies, de-escalating, and intervening when violence has occurred, healing trauma, supporting people, and building a sense of agency and capacity, and many other things. I bring up the social work shadow because social workers and many adjacent professions sit in a position that activist and author Sarah Schulman refers to as conflicted perpetrator, and are at risk of becoming what author Edward Said refers to as an imperialized intellectual, a figure whose genuine anti-imperialism and anti-racism remain structurally intertwined with the imperial and racist systems that they critique. And so reckoning with this is part of our work. When we talk about resilience, we're not just talking about the resilience it takes to do our jobs business as usual in isolation and compliance with the bigger institutions that fund our work, which in and of itself takes a lot. We're talking about the resilience it takes to keep showing up for our clients and each other with clear sight and discernment about when our jobs are individualizing collective problems, when a confrontation with our institutions is necessary and strategic, and with clarity about the need to build solidarity and collective power laterally in order to make meaningful change. As a white person now speaking to the other white people in the room, it's also about the resilience it takes to really look in the mirror and assess the safety and resources afforded to us and denied to our Black, brown, and immigrant siblings, and be willing to make the real material and sometimes bodily risks necessary in order to meaningfully challenge the systems that reward us and punish others as a strategy of division. An important component of resilience is the practice of assessing and discerning our individual and collective needs, which are influenced by our individual intersecting identities, our individual and collective material resources, and our individual and collective intersecting capacities. Resilience looks different for everyone, and resilience looks different at different moments in time. Taking a courageous risk may be a demonstration of resilience. So might resting, so might consistently showing up to the same boring task because it matters, even though it's boring. So might grieving, so might making time to just be with friends and not talk about politics. We're going to get into some different strategies for considering and assessing your individual needs and building capacity in a minute, but please know that if something doesn't resonate with you, that's okay. You know you best. We will be offering different pathways to resilience, and it's up to you to decide which ones are right for you.
Thanks, Rachel. So as Rachel just touched on, we are living through multiple converging crises: authoritarian and fascist resurgence, climate collapse, genocide, political scapegoating, and widespread disillusionment with the institutions that were never fully safe to begin with. Many of us are supporting clients and community through crises that we are also personally living through. That creates a layered emotional reality where you're expected to hold others while your own nervous system is under threat. If you feel overwhelmed, that does not mean you are failing. It means your body is responding appropriately to chronic instability, uncertainty, and threat. There's a quote from Gramsci that feels relevant here. The old world is dying. The new world struggles to be born. Now is the time of monsters. This was written during the 1930s, describing a period of crisis where the old crumbling order had lost its authority, but a new one had not yet emerged, allowing dangerous, reactionary, and chaotic monsters of extremism, authoritarianism, and fascism to thrive. So the real question for us isn't how do we stay calm, because staying calm under the circumstances is quite unrealistic and devoid of honoring the context that we're living through. Instead, I think the questions we should be asking right now are how do we stay human, and how do we stay in relationship, in the work, and in our values without collapsing or disengaging?
Thank you, Sophia. All right. Every day in my office, I sit with people who do not believe in their right to exist in this world, who are stuck in feeling that they need to prove themselves and do everything in their power to earn belonging, worth, dignity, and love, something I too have felt. This is one of the heartbreaks of living in a political economic system that puts profit margins ahead of the well-being of human lives in the living world. That tells us our worth is tied to what we produce, and for women and femmes, how much we give freely. The mentality of needing to prove our worth can show up anywhere. It might have even led us to become caretakers, social workers, and activists bent on being good and doing good. I've been there too. However, when we do not see ourselves as part of the world we are fighting for, when we do not root in our own dignity and worth first, not only do we unintentionally act out saviorism and supremacy dynamics, but we also burn out, and we burn out fast. Unlearning and composting the toxic messages from our culture requires remembering that we are part of the living world and that life itself is sacred, including ours. Something I often invite my clients to consider when they are struggling with validating their own existence is to consider whether a baby or a pine tree has to do anything in order to be recognized as valuable. Most people tell me no, and then we get curious about why this isn't the case for them. When we believe that we matter, we see that others matter too. When we humanize ourselves, we see others' humanity too. Validating our existence helps us act from a place of knowing that we are one part of a bigger whole that is suffering and needs attention. This belief creates a sturdy foundation to engage with the world from, one that may lead us to make sacrifices for the greater good, but not because we believe we must in order to see ourselves as worthy. All right. So we can't talk about staying human in this moment without talking about grief. No one's life goes untouched by it, but it does not touch us all equally. Many, many losses and deaths in our world are not natural. We all have personal grief, and we also all share collective grief. People around the country have been coming together to grieve Keith Porter Jr., Renee Good, and Alex Preddy, and to honor the message inside the grief. These lives mattered. And then there is another layer of grief inside of this when we look at the truth that many of us did not know Keith Porter's name until after we learned Renee Good's. Grief is not only about death. It is any loss we experience, including things we know that we or others needed and never got to have. Some examples of losses a person might be experiencing right now: loss of a predictable future, loss of material resources, loss of safety and protection, loss of rights, loss of mattering, loss related to disillusionment with political leaders and or the government, loss of the life you thought you might have when you were younger, loss of stability, climate stability, political stability, loss of home, loss of connection and belonging to a family, group, or organization demonstrating behaviors you cannot tolerate. Grief can show up indirectly through irritability, numbness, overworking, substance use, restlessness, hopelessness, and ineffectively doing the same thing or pattern over and over again. These are all examples of ways that we might have learned to avoid grief because grief is scary with its anti-productivity demands. It forces us to slow down and feel. And it especially scares us if we don't know who or where to turn to help us hold it. Grief needs validation, acknowledgement, and witnessing from ourselves and from others. It is communal by design. It also will, at times, inevitably be held in solitude. While scary to surrender to, when we allow ourselves to grieve, we often start to realize that we can hold much more than we once thought we could. As organizer Joanna Macy said, "The heart that breaks open can contain the whole universe." Perhaps this is a moment to consider what your grief practices are. What do you do when you're grieving? How do you name your grief? What do you need when you're grieving? Who do you turn to? Who could you turn to? What practices support you in connecting to your grief? Okay. Facing authoritarianism requires an embrace of interdependence. We cannot meet this moment alone. The forces we are facing are far too big. We need each other. We belong to each other. We build a new world through building resilient relationship networks that understand interdependence as inherent and as a resource for the survival and flourishing of everyone, without minimizing the difficulties that come with being mutually dependent on each other. So, what exactly is interdependence? I think Martin Luther King Jr. described it best when he said in his letter from Birmingham jail, "We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." I'm going to offer a short meditation on interdependence. If a meditation doesn't sound like something you're wanting right now, that's okay. You're welcome to just chill. This may also be a good time for a quick bio break. If you're choosing to participate, take a moment to start to notice your body. You might get more still, or you might need to move. You might close your eyes or keep your gaze softened and opened. It's all welcome. Feel yourself here. Notice your feet on the ground. Notice your sit bones landing on the surface beneath you. Notice your breath. Take a moment to reflect on why you decided to join this conference this year. Take a moment to consider who and what influenced you to become a social worker. Who and what influenced you to be involved in the fight for racial justice and liberation? Notice that web of people and events you're a part of. The web that brought you here. Notice the texture of the web, the shape, the weight, the color. Notice that everyone else here on this call is connected to their own web. Take a moment with that. Feeling for all of the other people here on this call with you right now. See if you can sense them feeling back for you. Perhaps your webs are beginning to link together for this moment in time as we share virtual space. What is that like? Perhaps you notice a sense of connection or strength. Or maybe you have concerns about this. That's okay too. Notice and acknowledge whatever is true for you without judgment. Take another deep breath, coming back to your web. And if it feels right, perhaps expressing some quiet gratitude to anyone you may want to thank inside or beyond your web, including yourself. At your own pace, come back to this virtual room. Okay. We're going to move on now to defining resilience and talking about what resilience really is. Many of us were taught to understand resilience as pushing through, always giving more, and never breaking down. Narratives rooted in white supremacy culture and capitalism, and the idea that it is noble to be a worker who will keep showing up no matter what you are feeling, rather than understanding this kind of behavior as a symptom of exploitation. This version of resilience glorifies efforting and erases the wisdom of the human body. We offer a different definition that comes from child psychologist Becky Kennedy. Resilience as the ability to experience a wide range of emotions and still feel like yourself. So, a little more about distinguishing resilience from efforting. Efforting we can think of as a reactive striving towards a wanted outcome, forcefully pushing forward, driven by fear, focused on achievement, and easily derailed by failure and loss. Resilience is more like a grounded responsiveness. It's flexible, it's in touch with the reality of risk and danger. It's connected to and informed by fear, but not driven by it. It's able to accept loss and failure and integrate lessons and new information from painful experiences. Resilience comes from connectedness, both to the external world and the internal world. All right. Connecting to our internal world is the first step in building the capacity to feel like ourselves while experiencing a wider range of emotions. This is not something that can be taught with quick, easy steps. It is learned over time and with practice. Through turning towards ourselves, we can learn more about what kind of pain we carry, how we have come to store it, what we have learned from our families and ancestral lineages about how to store and carry pain, and what pain did not originate in our lifetime. This often involves getting to know the parts inside of us that show up as protective patterns and strategies, and the parts of us carrying deep wounds and vulnerability. Some examples of what I'm talking about here. Parts of us that numb us out through dissociation or intellectualization in order to avoid feeling overwhelmed. Parts that look for others to blame as a protective strategy to ward off feelings of shame. Parts that look at ourselves with blame in order to protect against feelings of abandonment. Parts of us that keep us constantly busy and doing the same thing we've always done to ward off feelings of helplessness and uncertainty. Inner critic parts that constantly judge us as a way of trying to keep us in check and protected against feeling rejection and shame from other people's judgment. Hopefully you can see how in each of these examples I've described an internal dynamic between a protective part and a part of us that we have exiled because of its overwhelming feelings of vulnerability. We also all, at times, have parts of us that end up in conflict. An example of this may be a part of us that wants to go to the protest tonight and another part of us that is exhausted or shut down and wants to disappear. When we bring curiosity, compassion, respect, and understanding to our protective strategies, our internal conflicts, and our core wounds, we start to find more space around them. This allows us to explore other strategies for navigating fear, new approaches for tending to pain, find creative solutions for working through internal conflict, and make more conscious decisions about how to show up in this world aligned with our highest self. Confidence in our ability to hold ourselves when we're in pain is also developed relationally through sharing about the hard stuff with trusted people who are able to tolerate emotion, maintain love, care, and perspective, even while we are in the messiness of a hard feeling. In the moments where we may be working on this on our own, body movement practices, mindfulness practices, deep belly breathing, things that help you to get into a posture of being a kind witness or a companion to the protective and vulnerable parts of yourself can be very helpful. Another way to think about parts work is to think of yourself becoming an inner parent to whatever is happening inside of you. A patient and attuned parent that is capable of slowing down and sitting down with the uncomfortable emotion you're having, demonstrating that it actually is okay to feel this way because you believe in your ability to navigate it and or you know when you need extra help. Sometimes literally visualizing the part of you feeling the hard feeling and imagining yourself at your current adult age getting down at eye level with that part of you that needs attention can be helpful. If you can sense that you are going to judge yourself or what you're feeling or force the feeling away, pause and don't move closer. Get curious about those instincts instead. What might happen if you didn't do that? You may also consider some strategies to help with containment or managing the pacing and intensity of the feelings you're having. An example of a containment exercise may be to ask yourself to feel only one drop of this feeling at a time. Another example of a containment exercise is to literally visualize either a container or a safe, comfortable room where you ask difficult images, information, and feelings that are too overwhelming for you at this moment in time to go for safekeeping until you have the capacity or the support you need to work with them. Lastly, if parts work isn't for you, that's totally fine. What's most important is finding some way of helping yourself work with your internal experience, not just on a cognitive level, but also in your body. Research shows that the act of simply labeling or naming our feelings and body sensations as we have them decreases emotional pain because the act of acknowledgement allows our bodies to let go of some of the anxiety that is always there when the source of the internal pain is unknown or unacknowledged. Tools like the window of tolerance or the feelings wheel may be helpful with this.
Thanks, Rachel. I want to take that introspective place that we've been sitting in a little and tie it to the bigger picture a bit. Just as we've named how quick we can be to judge, shame, and blame ourselves for emotions we feel and the thoughts that we have, there's a similar tendency in mental health spaces to pathologize anger, resistance, grief, and rage in ourselves and in others, especially when those emotions come from Black, brown, queer, disabled, and marginalized people. But much of what we label as dysregulation is actually our bodies responding accurately to injustice. Privatizing and pathologizing pain and resistance is also incentivized by the medical industrial complex and by monetary gains. Social work ethics, at their best, align with liberation, not simply maintaining the status quo or managing harm quietly. Our role isn't only to help people cope, it's also to help people name, contextualize, and resist harm. As Sa DeSimone put it, we inherited a colonial Christian idea of what regulation is, and it has nothing to do with healing. For centuries, we've been trained to believe a good body is a quiet, polite, obedient, pleasant, manageable one. But real healing doesn't mean becoming quieter or easier to control. It means being able to move through intensity without abandoning yourself and without harming others. And we have to be honest, we cannot breathe our way out of fascism. Nervous system tools matter, but they become tools for gaslighting ourselves and one another if we do not also name the systems that keep people chronically activated. Racism, capitalism, colonialism, patriarchy, ableism, fascism, just to name a few. We are sold nervous system regulation like it's a neat, simple toolkit. But true regulation isn't individual, it's communal and it's systemic. Just as Rachel mentioned before, grief often needs a witness. You cannot separate the body from the world that it lives in. And we cannot talk about regulating the body and mind without addressing these chronic threats to our system. They impact our chemistry and they shape how we move through the world. Regulating, staying in community, cultivating hope, setting boundaries, none of those mean that your body will never rage, shake, or shut down. We must remember for ourselves and remind our clients that processing difficult emotions honestly is not a moral failure. When the body erupts, floods, or freezes, it's trying to complete a cycle of processing that, when interrupted, promotes internalized trauma, chronic pain, and higher likelihood of autoimmune disorders, and greater likelihood of mental health crises. There's a difference between calming the nervous system so that we can be present and calming the nervous system to avoid or escape reality. One is healing, and the other is sophisticated dissociation that can be exploited as a tool for fascism and oppression. And it is important to recognize that risks must be taken for systemic change to occur. Under oppressive systems, neutrality is not neutral, it becomes complicity. Systemic harm does not dissolve just because we avoid naming it. That is why we are offering tools to regulate, but also tools to take collective action towards dismantling these systems. So let's take that a step further. What does it mean to stop that potential cycle of avoidance and gaslighting? It means stepping into our roles as leaders. And when I say the word leaders, some of you might be cringing or resisting, because when many people hear the word leadership, they mentally opt out. We've been taught that leadership looks like extroverted charisma, having power in hierarchical structures, being authoritative, or being perfect. But restrictive definitions of leadership only serve oppressive systems. They convince us that only a few people get to shape our outcomes, when in reality, leadership happens in classrooms and caregiving, in organizing, in building relationships, in therapy sessions, in making spreadsheets, in making art, in influencing others to learn, in raising children, and so, so much more. Liberatory leadership asks us to expand how we understand our influence and to locate leadership in our real everyday spheres of impact. There are three core domains of liberatory leadership. One, visionary mindset and self-anchoring, which is cultivating an inner compass rooted in values rather than fear or reactivity. Two, relational and collective power, where we shift from power over to power with, distributing authority across community and building trust with others over time. This means co-creating decision-making practices. Liberatory leadership builds the conditions for connection and for mutual accountability, and intentionally redistributes authority rather than concentrating it. And three, transformative impact and well-being, aka measuring success not just by outputs, but by whether the work sustains people rather than burning them out. Impact is measured not just in what work got done or what binary battles were won or lost, but in how the work is done and whose well-being it supports. Leaders integrate care, rest, joy, ritual, and sustainability into the strategies we deploy. Liberatory leaders model humility, transparency, experimentation, and repair. They don't wait to feel fearless to offer paths to impact. They build confidence by putting their values into action and by practicing accountability. And importantly, inaction is also a choice that we make, and it carries consequences. While we may feel that we are avoiding harm by doing nothing, our lack of participation can reproduce harm in many ways, from signaling to others in our community that we don't care or that we aren't willing to take risk to protect them, by robbing our communities of the gifts we each have to give, by reinforcing for others that it's not safe to take risks and to contribute, and by limiting the impact of resistance against the systems that oppress us all. A great resource if you're looking to engage with this topic more is the book, The Right Use of Power. It skillfully explores how often when people become aware of the understanding that having power makes you more vulnerable to abusing power, we become very afraid of causing harm. But ultimately, we abuse power not just by overusing it, but also by underusing it. The path forward isn't around your fear or your discomfort, it's directly through it. As Pima Chodron shares in the book, The Places That Scare You, the most fundamental aggression to ourselves is to remain ignorant by not having the courage and the respect to look at ourselves honestly and gently. Courage doesn't mean confidently acting and not messing up. It means trusting ourselves to act, repair when we have caused harm, even unintentionally, learn from our experiences, and stay engaged. Here's some ways that you can act as a liberatory leader. Name systems as political, not neutral and unbiased, and explicitly challenge systems designed to extract and concentrate power. Center social reproduction as leadership work. Care, repair, and relationship holding are economic and political acts. They are not soft skills. Follow those closest to harm. Trust and platform those who have been deeply impacted by these systems to drive the direction forward. Practice collective decision making over individual authority. Build consensus and shared power, and practice transparency. Design for bottom-up systemic change, not top-down charity, keeping a focus on shifting structures, not mitigating harm that relies on your skills or privilege. And root leadership in local context. Strategies must be shaped by a place, the culture, and the community's realities. We can't work off of universal templates. Another critical tool to create sustainability in social change work is boundaries. Boundaries are often framed as cold or punitive, but I want to reframe them as relational tools. Boundaries help us protect ourselves and stay in connection with others. They allow us to love others and ourselves at the same time. There are signs when we need a boundary: overwhelming feelings of resentment, dread, emotional fatigue, avoidance, or the sense that you're giving more than you can sustainably offer. But boundaries are not about controlling or dictating other people's behavior, and they're not about quitting community. They are tools for us to take care of ourselves and to prevent us from showing up in spaces at a time and in ways when we're at risk of causing harm or are more sensitive to harm. And boundaries are what allow us to stay in community without burning out. Someone who is in burnout recovery and using boundaries well is transparent and honest about their actual capacity, not operating based on who they wish they were, who they used to be, or what they aspire to be able to handle, but what they can truly hold in a given moment. That can look like saying no to good things, not just bad ones, building recovery time into the calendar before committing to new activities, practicing changing your mind on something you previously thought you would have capacity for without intentionally shaming yourself, letting go of over apologizing for having needs. This one I personally struggle with at times, but it's an important one. Over explaining boundaries and context is a common neurodivergent or people pleasing tendency. It often comes from a place of trauma or threat prevention, but it can increase cognitive load and emotional exhaustion when you're attempting to do just the opposite. Speaking of boundaries, we have to talk about media consumption. We now have a constant, unlimited access to global trauma, but our nervous systems do not have constant, unlimited capacity. For social workers and community organizers especially, consuming nonstop crisis and tragedy online, in addition to the traumatic content and emotional heaviness we are exposed to in our day-to-day work, can dysregulate us faster than we realize. And the same is true for the people that we work with. Media boundaries, like other boundaries, shouldn't be about avoidance. They're about reclaiming autonomy so that we can stay engaged long-term without burning out. That might look like curating a few trusted news roundups that come at set cadences and reduce your doom scrolling. For example, leaving your phone off in another room for set periods of the day or certain days of the week. We're using apps like Refocus or Brick that delete social media and selected apps off your phone at certain hours or when you're in certain rooms of your home. Or setting no news windows in the morning when you first wake up and before you go to sleep. And intentionally following voices across all of your platforms that are grounded in decolonial thought, disability justice, indigenous wisdom, collective healing, celebrating hopeful and triumphant stories, and the like. There's also, unfortunately, growing AI-facilitated violence, which is digital abuse generated and spread by AI. This disproportionately targets women and people of color. While infuriating, it's unsurprising considering that AI is trained on pre-existing data that has gender and racial biases. Organizations like the Cyber Smile Foundation and tools like the Online Harassment Field Manual can help to prevent and address AI-facilitated violence and online violence in general. We're also seeing the spread of disinformation and misinformation more than ever before, in large part thanks to companies like Nano Banana, the new Google ultra-realistic image and video generator. These image generators make it harder than ever to discern between real and fake news, including violent images. The good news is that right now, there are clear ways to find out if the video or image is AI generated. If something looks shocking or rage-inducing or gives you any doubt at all, utilize reverse image search and attempt to verify its sources. Lastly, it's also important to protect your information and your data online as fascist overreach increases, not just for you, but for your clients and for your community members. There are some great guides in our resource guide that we'll be sharing to de-AI your life and delete your digital footprint. To be clear, the goal here for ourselves and our communities is not to internalize that in order to protect ourselves, we must stop reading the news or stop engaging. The point is to take a level of autonomy back so that we can engage on terms that help us reduce burnout and traumatization over time. The goal is to stay clear-headed, grounded, and capable of sustained action.
Thank you, Sophia. And just like unplugging and setting boundaries, a critical piece of sustainability and movement work is resting. Rest is not indulgent. Movement work, healing work, advocacy work all require energy, and humans are not built with unlimited stores of energy. The nervous system needs to expand, that is, stretch into growth space and the discomfort of doing new things, trying, learning, putting ourselves out there, and contract, that is, come home to comfort, ease, and rest. The work of facing authoritarianism, whether that means organizing your neighbors, distributing and reviewing Know Your Rights materials to your clients, making an ethical decision in an environment asking you to forego your ethics, all requires a lot of expansion. So we must balance this with finding ways to allow for the contraction that needs to follow. Now, I know it's easy to feel guilt about resting when we are closely connected to people in crisis, and we know that there is so much work to do. In these moments, it may be useful to remind yourself to think about the long term, to think about sustainability and what you need to do to protect against burnout, to remember that the oxygen mask metaphor is still true, even in these new conditions. Or perhaps go back to what we talked about at the beginning of the presentation around validating your existence and remembering that you and your human needs are all a part of this too. Additionally, it can be helpful to consider that rest is more expansive than just physical rest, although that is an important type. Social rest, emotional rest, sensory rest, mental rest, creative rest, and spiritual rest are all other types of rest we may need. I'm not going to go through all of these right now, but we'll give one example. If we're beginning to feel anxious about social events or are more tired than usual from meetings and avoidant of connecting with other humans, we may be needing social rest. Intentionally taking time away from your phone or scheduling a week of low or no unnecessary social obligations may be helpful for you. All right, last, I'm going to read out loud this quote by organizer Aaron Goggins. I've never met a single organizer worth their salt who was constantly convinced that they were doing enough. You will never get to a point where it feels like enough, and you really have to let go of the false assumption that we'll stop once we've done enough, because we'll never feel that. Instead, we have to resource ourselves with rest, with retreat, with reconnection, with regrounding, and reintegration. Those are the things we have to incorporate into our daily life, and it's not a luxury.
Thanks, Rachel. Even though boundaries and rest are deeply important, it's also critical to remain curious around feelings of dread, overwhelm, and avoidance, and not automatically assume that boundaries and rest are the answer. Sometimes they may be signals that we need to interrogate and a growth opportunity. There are some excellent guides, books, and prompts to help navigate internal cues to determine if you need to honor your current capacity versus if it's an opportunity to push through that discomfort. I highly recommend the book Are You Mad at Me for folks who struggle with people-pleasing tendencies. Conflict is Not Abuse is also an excellent book that frames the difference between uncomfortable or even offensive interactions and truly abusive or harmful ones, and the importance of relational accountability and repair. A good first step in determining the origin of feelings of overwhelm or dread is differentiating between decision paralysis versus demand avoidance. Dr. Gatika Pillai offers a guide with many of these key points you see on the slide here. Decision paralysis is driven by executive dysfunction. It looks like perfectionism, repetitive or obsessive thoughts, and it might feel like the more you have to do, the more you feel your body and your brain resisting. This is because the prefrontal cortex, the part of our brains responsible for planning, working memory, and prioritization, is getting overloaded. Stress narrows our working memory capacity and it makes it harder for us to evaluate and make decisions. So, what helps decision paralysis is shrinking the field, aka narrowing down the options to 2 or 3 choices, adding scaffolding to decisions like visual aids, checklists, or flowcharts, adding in reminders that the goal is to complete the task, not to do it perfectly, and if needed, getting a trusted friend or comrade to help externalize and process the choice. Demand avoidance, on the other hand, is driven by the amygdala and autonomic nervous system, which is perceiving potential demands, even self-imposed ones, as danger, and it's triggering the flight, fight, freeze, or fawn response. This feels like the loss of autonomy and control. What helps demand avoidance is softening the demand with reframes like, I can try this for 5 minutes, or I can show up and if I need to leave, I will. Taking time to notice physical sensations and regulating the body before moving forward and pairing choices with purpose is very helpful. Connecting the task you have to do with the values that you hold. Another helpful frame comes from Rio Richards' guide on when to rest versus when to engage. Some signs that rest is needed would be if your body feels depleted after small tasks, if you notice your internal dialogue displaying a lot of fragility, the nervous system feels raw, or you're getting sick more often. Signs to engage despite discomfort would be if you feel agitated and not getting more resourced after slowing down or being in solitude. Gentle activities like a walk or a phone call with a friend give you energy, or when rumination is filling a lot of your brain space. Finally, another framework I really like comes from coping cards made by therapist Eliza Shapiro, with prompting questions for different feelings. For instance, with anxiety, am I unsafe or am I uncomfortable? With PTSD, am I having a reaction to the past or to a danger that is tangible in the present? With social anxiety, is this emotion a prediction or an observable truth? We're socialized to shame ourselves and attach judgment to both demand avoidance, decision paralysis, and fatigue and explain it away as laziness or defiance. Understanding what's happening in our brains and in our bodies help create more self-compassion in addition to helping us move forward in ways that genuinely support our values and community needs. So here I'm attempting to dig into the ways we can continue to have frames for our values and needs, not as in tension with one another, but instead in support of each other. When decisions feel charged, overwhelming, or morally loaded, values are a much steadier compass than forcing urgency, guilt, or shame on ourselves or others. Goals are destinations, they end. You can meet goals while being deeply out of alignment with your values and feel burned out or resentful as a result. But values are directions. They guide ongoing behavior over time. Using a values compass framework like this one is common in acceptance and commitment therapy and can be incredibly helpful in helping us understand the question, how do I want to show up? Instead of being driven by what should I accomplish or what do people expect of me? Using a tool like a values compass is important in this work because values-based decision builds resilience when external conditions are unstable. When values lead, decision-making becomes clearer and less reactive, especially when doing work under fascism and authoritarianism. Everything feels urgent, and it might appear silly or blocking progress to pause and work through frames like this. But again, these small pauses can have a huge impact in not just keeping ourselves resourced, but also in ensuring that we're doing the work that will ultimately be the most aligned with community needs. I also want to call out the use of the word citizenship in this compass. This is meant not to refer to citizenship of a nation, but of a community. And sometimes we need more practical decision-making tools too. This decision tree on the right-hand side is an example of one that I made for myself. As someone with ADHD who struggles with people-pleasing tendencies, I realized I needed a bit more of a tactical application of turning my values into practice. Decision trees like this enable structured pauses also and help pose key questions like, do I feel pressured to respond immediately? Does this drain or does it nourish my energy? Is my body holding tension when I imagine saying yes? Will I resent this person or myself if I agree? Is this actually my responsibility or could it be delegated? With tools like these, the goal isn't perfect decisions. It's fewer decisions that cost us our integrity or our capacity. So now that we've talked a bit more about how to gauge your own capacity and direction, we need to talk about solidarity. Authoritarian systems thrive on isolation, infighting, shame, and purity politics. They benefit and oppression survives when we turn on each other instead of confronting and fighting the structures and the systems. Individualism fuels authoritarianism by isolating us. Two key groups that need to join in solidarity with others are bystanders and, like Rachel mentioned earlier, conflicted perpetrators. Solidarity is the antidote and the most effective way to combat authoritarian regimes. It means staying in relationship with one another, even when there is disagreement, rupture, or imperfection. If we only maintain solidarity until external pressures are faced, that's not solidarity. It's like only rooting for your favorite sports team when they win. It's easy to join a fight for a winning side. It's hard to stay in a fight when it feels lost, but that is the most important time to join together. I also believe that a sickness on the left is sometimes requiring ideological purity. If we require that in order to join the fight, we must all be there for the exact same reasons or be the same level of educated or woke, we won't be effective at taking shared action that moves the needle. And we further entrench ourselves in silos that only serve to exacerbate our PTSD and fragility. As Sarah Schulman said, perfectionism keeps us alone, consistency builds community. To me, this means internalizing that everyone doesn't have to be there for the same reasons or even what you deem as the right reasons. And keeping the focus more on actions and their impact rather than motives gets us farther faster. This also means making room for disagreement, but not making the requirement that everyone agree on everything all the time in order to move forward. I'm guilty of that one. We still need baseline expectations and ways of vetting one another to ensure that we can be safe and keep our communities safe. On an individual level, it's helpful to pick our bottom lines, the ones that we will not cross and we will not feel comfortable with others crossing, and then allow for flexibility above that line that enables diverse strategies within the movement. It also means picking your lane, choosing one or two areas where you can consistently and sustainably contribute, and then focusing there. We'll talk more about that in a moment. That doesn't mean engaging all the time. That means stepping in and stepping back as your capacity allows. It also involves picking an organization or a collective that you can tolerate and sticking with that. Notice that I said tolerate. Sometimes we come to movement or political work with an idealized vision that we are going to find our home, our chosen family, and feel warm and fuzzy all the time in those spaces. And while that can be true much of the time, organizations are still made of people, and people are imperfect. We are all learning. We all come to this work with different lenses. So we have to begin demystifying the concept of organizations, even more informal and decentralized ones, as perfect political homes. And we have to still engage with them. Conflict is inevitable, but it's not catastrophic. This is why it's important to build in political and movement work a healthy level of self-criticism and acceptance of mistakes. This is a radical alternative to modern day cancel culture, where there is encouragement of shouting one another down, shaming those who make imperfect efforts to learn or join a movement after mistakes. And it promotes not only further division, but the rise of performative apologies that leave no room for true learning, growth, and repair. Instead, we need to create group norms and expectations, normalize curiosity or questions, and get used to honestly naming harm and earnestly taking accountability in response to harm. That does not mean that we can snap our fingers and trust that others will keep us safe. Trust builds slowly through repeated small acts of showing up for one another. A way to create individual and group agency means letting go of controlling outcomes and focusing more on taking meaningful action when success isn't guaranteed. It also makes celebrating wins even more important. The systems we are fighting are so big and vast. And if we withhold joy, celebration, or validation from ourselves and others until we've toppled whole systems, we are guaranteeing our own burnout. Celebrate little wins with your clients and little wins in movement work and little wins in your day and week. Resting without guilt, one neighbor helped, one meeting attended, one thought pattern interrupted. Again, I just want to name that the true point of solidarity and mutual aid is recognizing that we all have things we need and we all have things we can offer. The safety, resources, and privilege we have to exercise is not universal. So those needs and offerings are going to be different from person to person. When overwhelmed on what meaningful action looks like, grounding questions, and you may be picking up on the fact that I like grounding questions a lot, can help. Ones like, in what ways can I be a neighbor today? How can I give to my community without expecting something in return? And what does care look like for me today? There are many incredible books and resources in the guide that explore solidarity and mutual aid, but one I would recommend is The Fantasy and Necessity of Solidarity. So as I just was speaking about, no one is meant to do everything. Movements require a diversity of contributions and roles. And to show up consistently, you have to find what part you want to play and what best fits your skills, needs, and life circumstances. One powerful starting point is a skills inventory. You will see a screenshot of that process on the left-hand side here. It involves first making a list of all your skills. That could be art, writing, driving, persuasion, translation, active listening. Then brainstorm how those skills can be leveraged in service of movement. For instance, being influential and trusted in your social circles, being diplomatic, staying calm under pressure could mean that you can effectively recruit and train others to join movement work or to build inroads with those who are oppositional. A key here is remembering that you don't need permission to begin. Do not wait for instruction to feel ready. You will make mistakes, but remember, withholding your power and gifts is also a choice that impacts others as much as exercising them is. Also, roles will evolve over time. You might shift between being a healer, a strategist, communicator, organizer, artist, researcher, or supporter. Your capacities are going to shift over time. The ways you contribute and the ways you see your clients, community members, colleagues, and friends contributing should change as everyone's time, risk capacity, and emotional and physical energy varies, and as people's skills and knowledge grows. No role is more important than another. You also don't have to build something from scratch. There are organizations already doing meaningful work who can plug you into volunteering, donating, mutual aid, and learning, many of which are in the resource guide we'll be sharing. And while it's important to find a role you can play and the gifts you have to give, it's also crucial in movement work to be flexible. If an organizer tells you what they need most, listen to them. Do not try and engineer a role that best fits your ego. Do not donate items that aren't needed to a mutual aid drive because it's what you had in your pantry. Make sure you're ready to engage the way that folks are telling you they need most. And if that's not a fit for your skills and gifts, then explore other ways and places to plug in. If you want more examples of how you can take part or more guidance in determining your skills, there's some great tools like callings and roles frameworks, and even a what type of disruptor are you quiz in the resource guide.
Thank you, Sophia. I'm going to move us into hope as a fuel for all this work. To hope is to maintain active commitment to possibility. Grounded hope imagines the possibility of a better future without denying what it will take to get there. Pessimism might feel heavy, but it can also feel protective in its invitation to resign. We do not know what is going to happen. It takes courage to hold on to hope despite that. Hope is what allows us to believe it's worth putting our energy into trying to shape the future the way we want it to go. Here's a selection of a quote by prison abolitionist Mariame Kaba. Hope is a discipline. It's less about how you feel and more about the practice of making a decision every day that you're still going to put one foot in front of the other. It's work to be hopeful. It's a hard thing to maintain, but it matters to have it, to believe that it's possible to change the world. Having practices for finding and building grounded hope is very helpful. Reading about history and specifically effective mass movements and organizing here and around the globe is a hope practice. paying attention to and spending time absorbing all of the many people and communities acting with moral courage and bravery in spite of their fear and personal risks is a hope practice. Looking for and learning about people who have meaningfully changed in response to moral confrontations with their own behavior is a hope practice. To close us out on hope, I'm going to read some excerpts from a blog post by trans anarchist organizer Margaret Killjoy after her time in Minneapolis last week. A few thousand federal officers are occupying Minnesota right now. No one wants them there. I've never seen a community half so united as the people of the Twin Cities. ICE is there to kidnap Black and brown people. They're not subtle about their racism. Masked men are simply snatching people out of their cars, throwing them into unmarked SUVs, and driving them away, often to never see their loved ones again. People's cars are left abandoned in the streets, sometimes still running, sometimes still in drive. In response to this, many vulnerable people have essentially gone into lockdown. There are families that can't leave their houses. Other people, friends, families, and neighbors are looking out for them. The networks that are looking out for them are far and away the largest, most organized, and most successful networks like these I've ever seen, and they're entirely decentralized. There's no central group or organization that is making this happen. It's just people who are organized. There are two sides to this struggle: rapid response and mutual aid. Rapid response networks organized to identify and track ICE vehicles and agents and to disrupt abductions in process. Mutual aid networks organized to get affected people food, medical care, rides, vet visits, company, whatever they need. These are two separate webs of networks. Partly because there's no central organization, it's hard to get a sense of the scale of these networks, especially the mutual aid networks. There are tens of thousands of people at least being cared for by these networks. The rapid response network is slightly more visible. When an ICE vehicle is spotted, people follow it in cars honking and blowing whistles. From afar, I have to admit, I was skeptical about the efficacy of whistles and car horns. After a few days on the ground, I had no more doubts. Basically, ICE agents seem to back off as soon as they are outnumbered, so they work quickly and in secrecy. Since abductions happen quickly, the response needs to be just as fast. And it works because when people hear whistles and car horns, they start looking out, they come out of their houses. Time after time, ICE has tried to abduct someone only to be scared off by Minnesotans in pajamas and Crocs. ICE will throw some tear gas, spray some pepper spray, and occasionally murder someone, and then run. Two people told me a story that is going to stick with me. The murder of Renee Good didn't stop people from observing ICE. That same day, a few hours later, elsewhere in the city, two queer folks were in a car in a parking lot observing ICE. ICE could have gone around them, but ICE wanted them to move. The two folks in the car didn't move. So ICE smashed out their windows and sprayed them with bear mace. ICE started beating them. They held hands, blind from bear spray, with broken glass everywhere. While gloved fists beat them, they held on to one another. They're both citizens, so after hours without medical treatment but full of homophobic slurs, they were released without charges. When they got home, their car was there. Another observer had gotten into a car full of pepper spray and broken glass and driven it home. They don't even know which of the observers did that for them, because whoever did it didn't stick around waiting to be thanked. Probably whoever rescued their car went back out to try and keep helping people. When I asked people where all of this come from, the answer was never some specific organization or network or coalition. Organizations, networks, and coalitions are part of this, absolutely. The core of the resistance is just neighborliness. Sometimes I just lay back and really think about the fact that it's whistles and car horns and crowds versus the modern Gestapo. And before I visited Minneapolis, I couldn't really wrap my head around the idea that this could work. But it does work. It works because people in pajamas and Crocs will scream at the fascists at 7 a.m. and take a face full of pepper spray and just keep doing it day after day. It's working, and I think we're going to win, and it's going to be messy and nasty. But while ICE is tangled up in Minneapolis, they're not about to exert as much force elsewhere.
Thank you so much, Rachel. So as we've mentioned, we've created a growing resource guide with books, somatic practices, grief and therapeutic frames, organizing pathways, burnout prevention resources, and mutual aid networks. It's intentionally not prescriptive. It offers multiple entry points and ways to filter depending on your capacity, interests, and where on your journey of self-work and activism you might be. You're invited to take what resonates, leave what doesn't, and revisit it over time. There's also an anonymous form on the resource guide where you can submit recommendations for additions, which we welcome. Lastly, we encourage you to share this with others as we want it to find and support as many folks as possible. Thank you for being here and for showing up with care and courage. We hope this offered grounding frames, validation, and practical tools. You'll also find the QR codes and the links for the presentation and deck and resource guide, as well as our emails. We'll put those links in our emails in the chat in case that's easier. We have time to answer some questions now, but if we do not get to yours, or if this work resonates with you and you want to continue engaging with it, especially at the intersection of individual healing and collective change, we'd love to stay in touch and we welcome you to email us. Okay, happy to answer questions if we have some time.
Hi, yes. Thank you, Sophia and Rachel, so much. I found this incredibly grounding, and we're getting a lot of love in the Q&A. And so what we will do is just like do some quick questions and then hopefully close with like we had a good question about the field of social work and how it may be reimagined and like social work values. So quickly, you referenced a leadership book, and it was maybe the right kind of something, or what was this leadership book you
The
mentioned?
Right Use of Power.
The Right Use of Power. Okay, so we're answering that live,
Yep.
but I'm also going to type it.
Thanks,
Okay.
Callie. And just for folks, if there's anything we mentioned in the deck, feel free to go back through to find the names. We tried to list things where we could, especially when we were quoting someone. But the resource guide is intentionally really filterable. So if you're looking for like something on grief or something on leadership or something on a particular topic, you're likely to find it if you filter.
Awesome. Thank you, Sophia. I know I've told you I'm very excited to share this with my students. Maddie asked about recommended news roundups. Do you have any news sources to help you target your consumption of news?
Yes. In the interest of time, I'll say, I know I sound like a broken record, but if you go into the resource library and you filter by like media discernment or media consumption, you'll find what I and Rachel find as our like most, I think maybe 4 to 6 sort of newsletters or journalist voices in independent journalism.
Okay, great. So in terms of all the recommendations, I'm just posting the resource guide and everything. I also, while we're on the resources, Angela pointed out that Tricia Hersey is the one who originated the phrase "rest is resistance." I know you've cited that in the resource guide, but just wanted to make that clear that this work is led by a Black woman who originated that phrase.
Yeah, thank you for calling that out, Angela and Callie.
Okay. With just a couple minutes, I'm trying to get at, Paula noted, this isn't really a question, but I think I would love your take on this. Paula said, media resilience is so difficult to teach young people. The unknown negative influence over time from social media or false and violent imaging is so worrying as a social worker and a parent. Do you have anything to say to Paula?
Rachel, I'll take a stab at it. I would love if you have something to add. I do think, at least right now, what we have access to is reverse image searching, and that is a pretty reliable. There's been a lot of studies done around how accurate that is currently, even under the increasing authoritarianism that we're under. I actually studied in a past role censorship by big media companies, and so that is one of the best ways to confirm if something is AI created or not. I know that's not perfectly fixable, but I did also reference the Cyber Smile Foundation. They're in the resource guide as well. They do some amazing work, and they have a ton of different resources, toolkits, and there's some great guides around how to talk to kids and how to teach media literacy, not just by them, but by some others. So it's not doesn't solve a very meaty, complex problem, but I think there are some good tools out there to help guide there. But Rachel would love to hear if you have anything to add.
No, I think that's a great answer.
Thank you. We are reaching the end, but I'm wondering, Sophia and Rachel, if you have 5 more minutes to just do a couple more Q&As for folks who can stay.
Happy to.
And awesome. And so for those who are hopping off, just a reminder that the next presentation will begin, or the next breakout will begin at noon Central. And then at 2 p.m., Prentice Hemphill will be on YouTube for the keynote plenary. So thank you for everyone. Feel free to hop off, but we'll do a couple more Q's and A's. So William Smith had asked a couple questions about social work values and the field of social work. So he asked, like, can you clarify if social work values are specific to individual communities and our code of ethics? And then he goes on to talk about how these values and ethics may not be upheld by everybody in the field of social work, and how maybe the field of social work might need to be redefined, whether that's through education or not. So we'd love your take on the future of social work and what the values mean.
Yeah, well, I will, if it's all right, Sophia, I'll jump in for a second. I'll just say I completely agree that, we have this code of ethics as social workers that, quite frankly, I think we think we have a good code of ethics, and it's certainly not being upheld, right? And we can see that in like the NASW's unwillingness to name a genocide, right? That's happening in Palestine, right? We could see that during the George Floyd uprisings with the NASW's commitment to partnering social work with police officers, right? The lack of critical conversation around like the systemic oppression that we're operating with as social workers. And so in terms of like re-envisioning social work or reimagining it, I personally think the most important thing is that as individuals, like, we recognize it's not going to be our institutions that save us, right? We need to be in solidarity with our clients and with each other. And that's how we make change. And whether that means like redefining social work or like using different words or whatever, I don't know. But I think it most important to me is how we think about power and what's going on here with power.
I think that's a great answer. Yeah, I think social work is a profession, and it's institutionalized just like any other profession, right? So the organizations and associations that make standard practices for social work, that guide the field, are not always motivated by the same things that motivate individuals to join the institution of social work or the practice of social work. And like a lot of other fields, I think you can look at history and find people who have done a lot of harm in the name of the profession, just as you can find people who have been radical and had a huge impact in the name of the profession. So I think it is important to continue redefining what social work means to each of us, and living our values through the career, but also recognizing that the career is just one lens that we can see ourselves and our work through.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm working my way through the questions, and this is very helpful. But in the interest of time, a quick question from Wendy. Do you encourage protesters to wear masks due to officers recording people? It's okay if you don't have an answer.
I think it's probably an individual decision. Like, I think anytime you go to a protest, anytime you show up to an action, thinking really clearly through your own risk benefit analysis is really important. And there are certainly like movements where there might be encouragement for everyone to wear masks, like for everyone to take a little extra protection in covering up identities. Yeah, but I think ultimately that's probably a personal decision.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel. I think in the interest of time, we are going to close up. We also maybe have lost Sophia. But I will stay online to answer as many of the open queues that I can. I'm seeing that some people aren't able to access the links. So what we are going to do is when this gets uploaded to the conference website, I'll ask that there be like links there to these resources. I know some of you have firewalls and stuff, so it may be the case that you're only able to access some of these links via your personal computer and not at work, unfortunately, or on your phone. So, but you have Rachel and Sophia's email address in case you want to ask for the resources directly, and you can always go back to the conference website. And in a few days, I think next week, everything will be posted online. So thank you everyone who attended. Again, I'm going to stay on for a little bit and answer as many Q&As as I can while people are still logged in. But otherwise, thank you so much for coming, and we will see you at the next breakout session in 40 minutes. Okay, thank you everyone.
Yes, thank you everyone.
Thank you.